This is an important subject, and I really appreciate the tone, Mr. Chairman, that you started with and the prayer. Everybody needs that right now. Before we discuss the specific topic of today's hearing, I too want to just mention two things that I think are appropriate for us as the Constitution Subcommittee in the House. First, as you noted, this is the first public hearing we've had since the terrible event that occurred in Minneapolis last week. And there are some things that I think anybody objectively observing these events can see and should agree on. I mean, the facts show that Mr. George Floyd appears to have been the victim of murder. And I personally don't believe that a close review of the video can lead anyone to any other conclusion. And the tragedies focus the spotlight once again, as you said, on the deep-seated problems we still have in this country. I think all of us agree the crisis necessitates authentic reconciliation and transformative solutions for systematic change. And I think we all agree that those are long overdue. The central idea of America is that we boldly declare the self-evident truths that all men are created equal. And for that reason, we're all endowed, the founder said, by God himself with the same inalienable rights. Because each of us is made in God's image, the founders insisted, and we still believe, that every single person has an estimable dignity and value. And our value is not related in any way to the color of our skin or what zip code we live in or what we can contribute to society. Our value is inherent because it comes from above. Any fool who contends that he has some sort of natural right of supremacy over his neighbors violates not only the foundational creed of America that's articulated in the Declaration, but he also violates the greatest commandments of his Creator. And I think that's important for us to acknowledge. My prayer is the same as yours, Mr. Chairman, that God will heal our nation and help us to see one another as he does. And we also pray that he protects the brave, honorable men and women who risk their lives every day on the front lines to serve in law enforcement, because they too are in jeopardy right now. Looting and more violence in our nation's streets does nothing to solve any of these problems. It makes it worse, and it needs to stop. And I'm sure I know we all agree on that as well. The second point I wanted to make is that all of us recognize that the COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically affected our country, obviously in so many countless ways. We want to express our condolences to the families and friends of all those Americans who have lost their battle to this invisible enemy. And we want to applaud the doctors, nurses, first responders, state and local health officials, and the Trump administration too, for taking crucial steps that have helped to stem the spread of the disease any further. I'm grateful that President Trump instituted an early travel ban from China, despite China's efforts to deceive the rest of the world about the effect of the virus. And I'm grateful the president instituted social distancing guidelines and sanitation protocols and created a task force led by our vice president, Mr. Pence, and several leading medical experts with decades of experience in public health. That's been very important for the country in our response. While we're all adjusting to the new normal of our nation, I and the other Republican members of this committee are also, we have to say this morning, disappointed that our committee is not physically meeting in D.C. right now to conduct this important hearing. You know, if we believe this, if grocery store workers and healthcare personnel and other essential employees can show up in person to do their job, we believe we ought to be doing the same thing. But on the issue of the hearing today, I just want to say this, and I'll be brief. We all believe in the importance of our elections, that's central to our republic and our democratic form of government. And we want every eligible American to participate in every vote. We just don't believe the suggestions proposed by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in regards to our upcoming elections are in the best interest of maintaining the integrity of our election system. Unfortunately, much of what's been proposed amounts to vast and broad federal mandates for how states should run their elections. We believe the mandate for the federal government is quite clear. It's in the Constitution itself. The Elections Clause gives states the authority to administer elections within their jurisdiction. Congress does have the authority to override state laws to regulate federal elections, but much like everything else in the government, states know best how to serve their citizens. They are in the best position to determine how to run their elections based on each state's individual needs. If enacted, we're concerned that the changes proposed by the majority will result in our nation conducting elections only by mail and ballot harvesting being legalized nationwide. Those provisions will decrease public confidence in the election process at the worst possible time and increase the election susceptibility to fraud. Even the New York Times has acknowledged, quote, that there is a bipartisan consensus that voting by mail, whatever its impact, is more easily abused than other forms, unquote. Similarly, the Bipartisan Commission on Federal Election Reform, it was co-chaired by former President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James A. Baker III, stated in its final report in 2005 that, quote, absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud in American elections, unquote. In addition to the possibility of voter fraud, absentee voting also presents several practical problems when compared to in-person voting on election day or early voting at an official early voting location. We need to seriously discuss the implications that these practices will have on our elections. And putting aside the technological and logistical concerns about federalizing the election this close to November, we need to also seriously examine the accuracy of state voter registration rolls. There are several examples of states whose voter registration rolls outnumber the actual number of citizens in that state. Registered individuals should only be receiving one ballot. I know we all agree with that. And we need to ensure the United States Postal Service can deliver ballots on time and to the right people. While I acknowledge concerns about the pandemic and the election, now is not the time to upend this nation's election system. There's too much at risk. We should be discussing how to vote in person and to do it safely in light of the new circumstances. We need to thoughtfully consider how the federal government can best empower states to make their own decisions regarding the election and to respond to their unique circumstances. I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses today. I hope we can have a productive discussion. I thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the tone and the opening, and I yield back.